What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Pick Swap podcast. This will be the last episode until James's return, but I have with me today my fellow Philly Sports Network writer, Zach Ciavolella. Zach, how are you today?
I'm good, Sean. How you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. And before we jump right into it, I would like to talk about our official sponsor, which is BetUS. And BetUS is the official sponsor of the Pick Swap podcast. BetUS has been in the industry for 25 years and is the leading online sportsbook and casino in the market. Make sure to log on to betus.pa and use promo code PICKSWAP as a first-time depositor to cash in on some great opportunity. The Sixers did not cover their +5 spread last night. Disappointing game versus the Miami Heat. So, Zach, first off, what were your initial thoughts on the 99-82 loss to the Heat?
Yeah, I mean the big thing that stuck out is that they're tired,
Mm-hmm.
and understandably so. With the game against the Cavs just on Friday night, apparently the Sixers didn't get into Miami until about 3 a.m. Yeah, they're they're tired, and I think that kind of sums it up. I do think that there were things that I liked in last night's game. And specifically, it was the resilience of the team. Obviously, they didn't win, and come the final few minutes, they looked, exhausted. But
Mm-hmm.
to hold the game as close as it was, to fight back from that 20-point deficit and then hold it as close as it was until the very end, against the number one team in the East when you're missing, your 1A in James Harden, that gives me hope for the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a resiliency in this team that we're beginning to see, and kind of a character that's kind of becoming ingrained in this team, which is nice to see. I mean, they shot the ball impressively bad last night when you look at the numbers. 28 of 82 from the field, which is 34.1%, 7 of 41 from three, 17.1%. You're simply not going to win games when you shoot the ball that poorly, and you saw the
Yeah.
tired legs. I mean, Niang was 1 of 8 from three.
Mm-hmm.
Joel, 0 of 6 from three, just guys not getting it going. And I mean, very difficult. You can see the tired legs. A lot of people referring to this as kind of a schedule loss, with just what a difficult back-to-back that is on a trip down to Miami.
Yeah.
That puts the Heat 3 games up on first place for the Sixers. Do you think that's a big deal, little deal, or no deal?
I don't think it's. I think it's no deal, frankly.
Yeah.
When you look at what the top seed got the Sixers last season, I don't really think it matters. And when you look at who's at the bottom of the Eastern Conference this year, I mean, the 8 seed could be the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah.
Who by then will potentially have Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and Ben Simmons. So, seeding is not overly important to me. General rule of thumb: as long as you have a top 4, preferably top 3 seed, that's better, but it's not the hugest of deals for me as of right now. So really, you saw the tired legs, like you said. That's something that I'm not overly worried about in the future, because again, it's a back to back. We talked about them coming in at 3 a.m.
Mhm.
I was very surprised that they were still so defensively coordinated and able to slow down Miami the way that they did. Obviously, Miami's seen certain stars uh, suffer offensively lately, thinking of Jimmy Butler, but still to hold them to 99, including just giving up a huge run to Miami at the end of the game. The defense, I think, is looking nice as we get close to the postseason, and regardless of seeding, that's something that is going to be a huge part of the postseason success.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm not caught up in the standings at this point. We saw the Sixers really prioritize getting that top spot last year, and it really just blow up in their face. So it's much more about how they're playing versus where they're standing, in my opinion, at this point. But obviously, it would be nice if they continue to climb. To touch on your point about defensively yesterday, they were doing some really interesting things defensively. They were playing sort of
Oh
like
yeah,
a flex zone for a lot of
yeah.
that game in a way that I really haven't seen them run that all season. So very interesting what they were doing. Dropping the it was pretty much like a 2-3, but the second
hmm
guard up top was dropping like into the free throw line for most of it. So I don't know. It was interesting how they're mixing up. Did you notice anything about that? And also, what are your thoughts on Furkan Korkmaz getting the start last night?
Well, I'll talk about the defense first. I noticed the zone. I welcome the zone. I thought it was fantastic. It was a very smart choice against Miami.
Hmm.
Credit to Doc Rivers for making that decision. Really made it easier on his team, and whether or not part of the reason they went zone is just because everyone was so tired or not. Regardless, it worked. It's something that I expect to see come playoffs, but it's definitely something that I'd encourage, especially depending upon the matchup. There's a lot of teams in the East that's going to be effective against. I'm not too sure about Brooklyn, but when you look at Milwaukee, I think that's a team that potentially you have a good shot against running that zone. Miami, obviously, it worked to a degree. Just got to get the offense going. So it's definitely something that I very much welcome. I think it's something that allows Matisse Thybulle to kind of play almost like a free safety type role and roam a little free. So, obviously he's going to be stuck on the best player on a little man action, but he can definitely drop back in coverage a little bit as well, depending on where the ball is thrown on the opponent's offense. So, defensively, again, loved it last night. I really hope to see that come playoff time. It's just a matter of Doc Rivers implementing it. But as far as Furkan Korkmaz is concerned, I don't know what has to happen to get him going. I very much understood the decision to start Korkmaz. You want to instill confidence in him, build that confidence. And we've seen it before where Korkmaz gets in a little bit of a rut. You throw him in the starting lineup and he gets a little bit closer to what we expect out of Korkmaz. But last night obviously wasn't the case. Offensively, defensively, just not up to where expectations are. So going forward, it's kind of a huge question mark. I think there are really two avenues that you can go down, making sure that Shake Milton sees more minutes over Korkmaz, but Milton's not without his faults. That's part of the problem. Or depending on matchups against the other team, going big a little bit. And once DeAndre Jordan starts playing, you can run Paul Millsap at the 4 a little bit. You can run Niang at the 3. Danny's your 2, and this is assuming an all bench lineup, but you get what I'm saying. And Milton as your 1, theoretically as your 5 backups. So it's not looking like Korkmaz is long for this rotation, but Doc Rivers could keep him in regardless.
Yeah, it's very disappointing just what has happened to Furkan this year. I mean, I understand the move to try and get him going, to try and build some confidence, show the confidence in him. He simply is not as bad of a player as he has been playing this year, but he is just in some sort of funk in a way that I would have imagined. And the difference to this team is Furkan Korkmaz playing at a high level that he's capable of would be a very impactful player on this team.
Absolutely.
So there is hope to get him going, but I just don't know what's going on this year. It really is just kind of turning into a lost year. And you've seen him add things in terms of being able to drive more, be that point guard Furkan, do a little more of that. But for a guy whose calling card is as a shooter, be in the upper 20s for 3-point%, and you can see kind of just mentally there, the shooting himself out of the rut to then start last night 0-3 from 3, including 1 air ball. It was just kind of one of those this just doesn't feel like it's happening.
Yeah, well, a quick side note about those 2 rough shots early on. The Sixers weren't doing him any favors on those 2 shots. Both of those shots, I believe he got with under 3 seconds left on the shot clock. And so that leads to just, at least he didn't pass it. You have to shoot, basically. You don't really have another option. So I'm concerned about the missed shots in total. Those 2 in particular, I kind of take with a grain of salt. But kind of getting back to something that you said earlier, I think that's part of the reason why we've seen him struggle a little bit. You mentioned Point Furkan. He hasn't had a consistent role all season. And I think it's that kind of, wishy-washy, what's your role, that has led to this kind of shaken confidence that Korkmaz is experiencing. And so I don't think any player, or I guess I should phrase it this way, I think few players will benefit from a full off season with James Harden more than Furkan Korkmaz. I think that he's going to have, not that he's guaranteed to be with the team next year, because of course anything can happen on the trade market, but assuming that he is, and assuming that James Harden is back, which all signs are pointing that he will be a Sixer next season, I think Korkmaz is going to return to form next year. It's just, how do we get him closer to that this year? And it could just be a matter of numbers of games played with James Harden, but regardless, it's about narrowing down that role. That way he knows what his job is, which should be to shoot, and he can go ahead and perform that well.
Yeah, and as much as I have praised Daryl Morey deeply, that is a criticism that falls on him for not having another guy that can be a point guard and a ball handler. And we've seen this for just what a difference James Harden has made in this offense, which, of course, this is covering up for the Ben Simmons who wasn't there all season. but just having another guy that could be served as that point guard could have opened things up in a major way for this roster, and that takes responsibility off Ferk. I'm not saying this fully cures whatever mental yips he's going through this year, but it still is a responsibility that could have been taken off his plate in a way that I think would have been beneficial to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and to transition a little bit, so Joel Embiid last night ended with 22 points and 15 rebounds. The stats look fine, but not a great game from Joel. 4 of 15 from the field, 0 from 6 from 3. This is coming off a streak of games for him where he looks a little sluggish, just looks a little tired. I mean, he's had such a high offensive and defensive load throughout the entire first half of the season. Do you think we're hitting a point where maybe he could just use a couple scheduled rest days himself that would be beneficial to putting some energy back in the legs?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that goes without question. I mean, if you look at listen, Kawhi had to do it, so there's no shame in Joel taking a rest day here or there. Preferably, you're doing it, not there were obvious reasons why James Harden had to rest tonight or last night against the Miami Heat. Preferably your rest games are coming against, the Detroit Pistons, who they face a couple times before the season's over, the Indiana Pacers, games such as that. Unfortunately, it's a very tough march up ahead. So I think that might play a factor into how many rest games Joel gets, but he should certainly get more than one between now and the end of the season because you just need him fresh. You want him to, be able to have his legs into the fourth. One thing that we've seen that's been really impressive of Embiid this season is that he's lasting longer in the fourth quarter. And that is with taking on more of a load, than in the past season. So he's having to work harder, but he's able to continue that late in games. However, a back-to-back where he becomes the sole focal point on offense, that's a little tougher. But you want to make sure that he's able to do that in the playoffs as well. As you progress through an 82-game regular season, you're only getting more and more tired. So at the end of the season, rest games become more and more important.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking ahead to their schedule, they have the Bulls tomorrow, the Nets on Thursday, and then the Magic on Sunday. That's a game that I personally have circled as a game that I think maybe might be one for Joel to rest on. We'll see what the Sixers end up doing. Obviously, it's extremely important to keep getting Harden and Embiid reps together to continue to build that chemistry. And another takeaway from last night, as if it wasn't obvious enough from the entire first half of the season, this Sixers team needs James Harden. He's absolutely a vital part of what they're doing. The whole being a playmaker, everything that he adds to this team is absolutely necessary if they want to be that top level team. So my next question for you would be, are you surprised just how much the influence of James Harden, him being here, has just skyrocketed Tyrese Maxey's game to another level?
So short answer is yes. So I knew that James Harden was not as bad a teammate as he had been painted as by 100%. Previous organizations, by the media. So I wasn't worried about him as a teammate. Did I think that, he was going to come on in and be such an absolute force to, the entire team, but especially Maxey? No, I didn't think in a million years, but he's taken Maxey under his wing and then some, and has just instilled him with the level of confidence that Maxey's going to need to be a true star in the league. We saw it 2 nights ago against the Cavs, I believe it was. Was that the game where Maxey had like 4 points at the half? Or
that was the game before.
That was the Knicks game. Yeah. So I'm thinking of the Knicks game here where he had about 4 points at the half. James Harden approaches Maxey and asks him something to the effect of, "Are you going to play tonight?" Just flat out, no holds barred, and Harden's influences made Maxey so much more, I don't want to say, not that he wasn't competitive, but driven, So Maxey's always worried about being a good teammate. I think that's something that's been clear from the start. But Harden's showing him that, well, to be a good teammate, sometimes we need you just to light it up. And so that's what we saw last night from Maxey. I thought that he was just an absolute gunner. So I'm thrilled about it. I think it's only good.
Yeah, definitely. And in the 3 games with Harden, 21 points, 25 points, and 33 points. 26.8 points per game average over that 3-game span. The thing I'm most impressed with is just the willingness as a shooter and the growth in that area. And
Yeah.
you see with Harden in this offense the way he just creates open looks for guys. And Maxey's a guy who's absolutely capitalizing this. He's up over 40% on the year, went 3 for 6 again last night. I absolutely believe in the shot at this point as him as a legitimate shooter.
You
And
have to.
yeah, you absolutely have to. And you're seeing the confidence in him just grow and grow. The step backs he's starting to hit, the way he's hitting, just creating separation. And to have that as like a legitimate shooter with the pace he has, that opens up everything in his game. And he just continues to surprise me for how good this guy is.
Yeah, I noticed last night he's starting to take more and more shots closer and closer to the logo. You know, he's not taking Dame Curry shots yet, but he's moving a little bit further and further back from the three. I think that's absolutely part of the influence of James Harden. And I feel confident in saying that in a couple years, we're going to see him taking some shots that are well beyond the 3-point line with consistency, and he's going to be making them. It's absolutely insane how far along his shot has come, and it's very clear that his confidence is a driving factor behind it. So that's another reason why James Harden has been so important to his development.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's shooting for just about the exact same attempts this year versus his year in college. He was a 29% three-point shooter in college versus shooting over 40% this year. So that is a testament to him putting the work in, getting better, and just the opportunities that he's getting and running with it. So I absolutely love it. I do genuinely believe down the line that the keys to this organization will be handed to Tyrese Maxey, and I think he's going to be ready when the time comes. To touch on a guy that hasn't quite been as seamless a fit into the offense so far is Tobias Harris. And I mean, obviously there's some growing pains. I don't think it's as sound alarm big a deal as a lot of people are making it seem. But what are your just thoughts on Tobias Harris overall fitting into this new look Sixers offense?
Yeah, so Harris overall has been he's been trying very hard to find his role and defining what exactly that is. Now, I think personally that his role should become literally like catch and shoot. Like that's what I need from you. Play solid defense, catch and shoot, run with the bench unit. You know, that simple there. But I think the biggest reason for his recent struggles is just a lot of it appears to be mental. You know, you see when he works his way into the paint, he just seems to be processing too much in too short amount of time. And that's what leads to a lot of his, you know, whether they're balls that are getting stripped, you know, from him or just off shots. I mean, last night his shots were all short, and that's part of just being tired, you know, like we talked about earlier. But we've seen a lot of short shots otherwise that I think are more so just a lack of focus on the shot itself and more so just processing his next move. So with Harris, I think it's taking a breath, relaxing, and really just letting the game come to you. So we'll see if he can do that, because Harris has never really been that type. But if he can do that, I think you're looking at a player who's going to fit in very well with this offense.
Yeah, it's been a tough year for Tobias Harris. When we think about there was the fan issues of him getting sick of the booze early on, he's been, to be fair to him, the guy that continues to show up. And to talk about like having to swallow your pride as a professional basketball player, like you're jumping from the second option to now the fourth in a very quick span of time because of James Harden, because of the quick rise of Tyrese Maxey, who's just taking his game to another level by being able to play free with a guy that's distributing. And now with Toby, the things that the Sixers really need him to do are just not what he's best at. And it's very obvious to pretty much everyone watching that he's not an exact clean look in his offense. Best to fit in, and you can see he's consciously aware of the things that like Harden specifically wants him to do and what the Sixers specifically want him to do, but it's just not really his thing. Like when you think about fitting in this offense, the passed up threes are the things that drive me personally insane, especially when it turns into the dribble into contested twos. And like Harden had a quote after the Cavs game where he said, just like, when I'm driving, get that thing ready basically, and just be ready to catch and shoot. And Harden's very much being nice about it now, but when we get toward the postseason, like it frustrates me for a guy who is legitimately a good shooter. Like he shot 39.4% from three last year. He's a 36.5% career shooter. His numbers were down this year. They're up to 34%, so on the upswing. But it's frustrating me just like shoot the ball more. Like we want you to shoot these. The 3-point looks specifically are yours for the taking, and to not be taking advantage of them is incredibly frustrating to me.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think that the the not taking threes, the pump faking is the most frustrating thing for most people. And you talked about Harden's expectations of him. I think it's safe to say that nobody sees this ending well with Harris. And what I mean is, that they may very well win the championship, and that's all well and good, but it seems like he's destined to change teams in the offseason. I don't really know how you go about it another way. I think it's something that all parties are going to want. I don't think Harris wants a fourth role where he's having to play out of character in an offense. And I don't think the Sixers are going to want to pay 36, 37 million he'd be making next year for a guy that doesn't fit, and Harris is kind of the antithesis of a Daryl Morey guy in terms of play style. So I very much see. I mean, you have a hard time figuring out where he's going to go. A lot of people think salary dump to Houston or to the Oklahoma City Thunder, something like that. I think there are a lot of teams that could use a guy like Tobias Harris. I think there's a lot of teams that he would look good on. So I imagine there'd be some kind of market for him, but it's just unfortunate when you think about it, how he kind of just is resigned to having to do this for the rest of the season. Ideally, you want someone who just kind of fits and rolls with your team. And so I can't remember who I saw it from off the top of my head. It was just someone who I see from time to time on Twitter threw out the idea of starting George Niang instead of Tobias Harris and having Tobias run with the bench unit. Fit wise, that makes tremendous sense. That being said, you can't bench Tobias Harris. Logistically, it's unfortunately not an option. And you want to think that you can do that and phrase it to him as a leadership position. And of course, Niang is such a perfect fit with James Harden. But I think more so what you're going to have to do is find a way to stagger players in that sense. And it's also kind of a shame because who really fits with Harris? You think about pairing him with one of the three stars. I guess Harden's the best fit, but at that point, you're also missing out on pairing him with a bunch of catch and shoot specialists.
Yeah, definitely. And Tobias is very interesting as a basketball player because he's obviously very skilled. And like when you think about a power forward that would 100% fit in this Sixers offense, I think about guys like Jay Crowder, PJ Tucker, and even George Niang fits that list.
Yeah, sure.
Tobias is absolutely a better basketball player than these guys, but it just doesn't click the same way with him in there. So he's and specifically when things are not going right for Tobias, that brand of basketball looks particularly bad when it's the fadeaway hard twos that aren't falling. So it is a tough situation. I totally agree. I think this will be the last season with Tobias Harris as member of the Sixers, and I think everybody is maybe not aware of that, but will reach that point when the time comes.
Sure.
But for the short term, getting him effective, I mean, it's tough. Like you said, like there isn't really a clean fit with what you want him to do, and like guys that he can pair with. We've seen the Tobias and the bench unit for since the Doc and this whole era has come. There's been a lot of that, and it's survivable. Like there's been good looks, but just when you think about like the most effective way to use this offense, like Maxey, Harden, and Embiid are just simply better options. And with limited touches to go around, limited basketball, Tobias is the guy taking a back seat. Now, an area that I do hope for him to embrace a little more and become more impactful on the team is on the defensive end. And I know this is a tough ask because that really has not been his calling card throughout his entire career. But I think if he can fill that role, like Harden more than makes up for the playmaking that was lost out with Ben Simmons, but there still is a missing part when we talk about the defense and the being just a glove guy with that. So do you think Tobias could grow in the defensive end and handle that role, or is that asking too much?
Situationally, yes. He's a little limited athletically. I think where you benefit a little bit is that he's he is a smart basketball player for all, of what he gets. Obviously he doesn't make, the wisest decisions in terms of fit on offense. We've talked about that already, but I think that he could, similar to how we saw George Niang absolutely body Giannis
Yeah.
during the last game against the Bucks. I think you can get that level of situational defense out of Harris, and I don't know about him guarding Giannis specifically, but if you have him on a Chris Middleton, if you have him on DeMar DeRozan's too tricky, man. But if you look at really anyone who is around a similar size as Harris, maybe even a little bit smaller, who either is limited athletically or is limited with their shot. It's got to be one like they can't be. There's no Kevin Durant guarding in Tobias Harris's future.
Yeah.
But I think even he could potentially guard Ben Simmons.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds almost like a joke because people talk about, well, you don't have to guard Ben Simmons in the playoffs, but you want to make sure he's not getting easy buckets, and I think that's exactly what Harris can do. So I think there is a pivotal role defensively that he can play, especially come this playoffs.
Yeah, a game that stood out to me pretty recently was the Timberwolves game where he spent majority of the game matched up with Karl Anthony Towns, and
Yeah.
that's obviously a matchup that's expected for Joel. But by allowing Joel to guard Jared Vanderbilt, who isn't really an offensive threat, Joel was able to kind of patrol the paint while Toby was locked up with Cat, and that made a difference for what Joel could do. Just being that rim protector, being able to do all that frees things up, and that is a credit to Tobias for making that happen. Also, absolutely need to forget about all the holding the contract over the head and the should not be looked at for scoring totals at this point. That's always been kind of I've hated that logic and that reasoning. And sure, do you expect your highest paid players to play well? Absolutely, but like it shouldn't be a criticism to Tobias the amount of money.
Oh yeah, I mean Harris didn't offer himself that contract.
Right,
It's
exactly.
the Iguodala thing all over again, where people hated Iguodala for the contract that he took, and how's that his fault?
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
want to blame anyone, blame the Sixers front office, and cheer for your guy from there on out.
Yeah. Do you want him to say no to that? Like, if I'm in his shoes, I'm absolutely not.
Oh yeah, if they want to sign me to that contract, I can't play with a damn compared to any of these guys. But yeah, no, I'll take the money. Like
Yeah.
whose fault is that?
Exactly. And so defensively, the guy that I think is looked at as like the stopper is Matisse Thybulle, but I
Sure.
really am a little bit fascinated with how this all is going to work fit wise with Matisse, because while he is like such a extremely talented and unique defensive talent, I really don't think that's the right kind of phrasing or word with him, because he's not. I wouldn't consider him as much of a stopper as he is just a disruptor in the defensive end.
Yeah.
And he's not really. He's improved in his one-on-one defending since his time in the league for sure, but I just don't think that's what he's best at in terms of like schematically how things work, because of how much he gambles and
Yeah.
goes for the steals, goes for the blocks, goes for the impact play, which he gets at a very high rate. But at the times when he doesn't, it just allows for shots and it changes the whole defense. So this is also the area where I see Tobias is just more steadier, not gambling, not taking risks, just being a good defender and allowing Matisse to be that kind of a bull in a china shop wrecking ball on the defensive end. So, I mean, do you see Matisse as like a guy that you're comfortable with in a one-on-one situation with every matchup, or not as much?
I mean, every matchup is kind of tough. I think it's like if they were on different teams, would I be comfortable with him guarding Joel Embiid? Like, no, absolutely not. But when we're talking about perimeter on ball defense, I think Matisse Thybulle is a top 10, maybe at worst top 15 on ball defender in the league.
Mhm.
But he's a top 3 perimeter defender, and that just speaks to how good he is off ball and as a disruptor, like you mentioned earlier. So the answer is yes. I'm comfortable with it, especially considering who else is on the Sixers roster. But I think you have to look situationally at who he's going to guard. And you think ideally, best player. Obviously, he guarded Trae Young. He guarded Kevin Durant. But when you look at a situation like against the Milwaukee Bucks, for instance, you're probably going to want him sagging off on the perimeter in an area where you have Tobias possibly holding off Giannis with Matisse Thybulle as a secondary help, because obviously
Mhm.
Harris isn't preferable defensively against Giannis, but the combined defensive effort of the two of them, I think that's where you see that support role out of Matisse Thybulle. So it really comes down to situations, but I guess the best way I can put it is bottom line. He's my guy when you're guarding Trae Young, Kevin Durant, probably Zach LaVine. So
Yeah.
looking at some of the guys in the East. So I feel confident, but I'm also kind of forced to just because of the lack of perimeter defense on this team.
Yeah, for sure. And that was something that we took for granted with Ben Simmons because of what a unique just athletic ability and size and everything that came with him is you weren't really concerned on the size matchups and things like
Yeah,
that. And with Matisse, like and again, I'm not this isn't a major concern of mine because he is so talented and so good at what he does, but the way he defends just being like the gambler and the risk taker, and it's so fascinating to me the way he like defends from behind on a consistent basis. And that's all
yeah.
because of his length and the 7 foot wingspan, the way he's able to do
Mhm.
it. But it changes everything defensively in terms of when he's like letting a guy go by so he can like poke it out from behind or block from behind. That causes like Joel to step up and shift. That causes everything defensively to shift in a way that
Yeah.
it just like it works because of how good he is at what he does. But it really, from a traditional sense, is just not how you're coached to defend basketball.
Yeah. And
So
against the right offensive player, it's a little scary for the Sixers, because there are players who can find a way to take advantage of that.
mhm,
Uh, but it's a sight to behold because it's
yeah.
the kind of thing where on paper it makes no sense. This should not be working, but it works for Thibault.
Yeah, yeah. It is fascinating, and he is so fun to watch when he has it going and is making the right reads. And again, I'm not heavily concerned, but it is something I
Yeah.
just kind of am interested to see play out and where everything fits in.
Yeah, I think it's something interesting to watch going into the playoffs, and then I think it's a long term, not necessarily concern, but something to keep tabs on.
Hmm.
Ideally, when you're moving forward this offseason, future off seasons, you want to get another, maybe even slightly bigger body perimeter defender. I mean, you
Yeah,
mentioned
absolutely.
Jake Crowder earlier. That kind of solid on ball. He doesn't have to be spectacular. Like Jake Crowder is not one of the best in the entire league, but you need somebody with solid size, thinking somewhere between 6'6" to 6'8", something like that. Fluid athlete and solid on-ball defender. That's the type of player. And good luck getting them because they're wanted by everybody. But
Yeah,
that's the kind of extra defender that I'm looking for from there because Thybulle has the versatility to defend point guards up through. I mean, well, again, he defended Kevin Durant, but ideally you can have Thybulle guarding the best guard on the team and that secondary defender who I mean, the player that I described is pretty close to Ben Simmons defensively, but
yeah.
they can guard whatever bigger body. That way, you can allow Thibault also to kind of play that off ball role.
Yeah, totally agree, and that's the biggest missing area of this current Sixers team. So the hope is that like the top tier and everything else, the top tier talent and everything else that they have is enough to overcome that.
Yeah.
Looking to the bench unit specifically, I guess let me start off with who do you think is the most important bench player to this team's success? I didn't prep you for that question, so sorry to throw that on you.
No, no, you're fine. It's just I have two names in my head immediately. Uh, George Niang is so important
Mhm,
to this team, and I have the utmost faith in him that he's going to deliver come crunch time. But I think the most important player on the Sixers bench is going to be Danny Green. And I think he's going to need to step his game up for the playoffs
mhm,
is basically what I mean by that. The way he's played in the regular season has been fine, but it's not been satisfactory for what the Sixers need come playoff time. So, and I think Green's been reserving himself a little bit
yeah,
from what I can tell. So I think come the playoffs, we will see an even better Danny Green, and I think that's going to be key. He's not going to play as much of a role as he was expected to last postseason, but it doesn't mean it's going to be a less important role. He's going to need to be knocking down shots, with regularity. He's going to be needed as a basically a secondary option as a perimeter defender.
mhm,
So definitely something that I mean, situationally based on matchups, you might even see a game or two where we go small with the lineup, and it's maybe not starting, but you see Danny Green, Matisse Thybulle, James Harden, and Tyrese Maxey with Embiid out there at one time. So I think that you're going to need that defensive effort from him, and a 3-and-D guy goes a long way in the postseason. So I think Danny Green is going to be the most important bench member for the Sixers.
yeah. That's a great point. I mean, I still wouldn't be shocked if there's games where they elect to go with Danny Green as the starter over Thibault in the postseason, depending on
Sure.
obviously the matchups and everything that goes with it. And to be honest, there's an aspect of me that kind of likes that as Matisse as like an off the bench change up to throw to the team and being able to like once the
Yeah.
guy starts to get it going, be like, all right, Matisse, go run around and follow him for however long they're out there, which I kind of like.
I feel like
Uh,
that's exactly the kind of thing that could throw off Chicago
yeah,
specifically.
yeah.
So I love that idea.
Yeah, definitely. For me, I have to go with Georges Niang as the most important bench member, and I am surprised how much I've loved Georges. And this was a signing that like I was fine with when it happened, but not something I had crazy high expectations for. And I mean, first off, to consider like he was really the replacement to Mike Scott, who the Sixers
Yeah.
got absolutely nothing from by the end of his time here.
Yeah.
And then just to look at everything he brings, both fit wise, is a guy that just absolutely slings it and absolutely lets it
Yeah.
fly every chance he gets and the attitude and energy that he brings, like that
Mhm.
is so needed on this Sixer team. I mean, you saw him last night. Him after he shot 1 of 8 from three. The one 3-pointer
Yeah.
that he did hit, he is looking at Heat fans, telling them to shut the blank up and
Oh, yeah.
doing all that. Which I love the energy. The guy brings it every single night. And defensively,
Yeah.
obviously, he's super limited in his athletic ability, some slow feet, but he competes every single second. And
Sure, and he's strong too. He's sneakily
yeah, yeah,
strong.
yeah. Yeah, he can take the hits from bumping down low, and that helps him a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, the ability to stretch the floor is the biggest thing. The guy that's been a pretty near 40% shooter for the
Yeah.
entirety of his career, and fit wise will be interesting. But I also don't mind the idea of going big and throwing Yang in with the lineup during stretches.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely a time where it makes some sense. Even if you want to have him, let's say you have a lineup around Harden, so it's Harden, Danny Green, George Niang, Tobias Harris, and DeAndre Jordan is one of your uh, not quite a bench lineup, obviously, but more so where you're switching it up and staggering starters.
Hmm.
I'm more than comfortable with that, honestly, compared to other alternatives. So I definitely think that Niang is going to be a huge part of the Sixers' potential postseason success.
Definitely. And a quick shout out to Shake Milton, who has looked much better since coming back.
Yes.
And I think there's absolutely a role for him if he can continue to keep it going. And I'm just honestly just happy to see that version of
Yeah.
Shake come out a little bit. You saw in the Cavs game specifically was one where it felt like he had it going a little bit and was having some fun.
Hmm.
So I'm happy to see Shake kind of have a little bit of his mojo back. Been a very tough year for Shake. First time in double figures since December was that Cavs game. So do you think Shake is just as valuable a piece in this offense or in this rotation as well?
I mean, just as valuable. That's a little tough. Do
Yeah.
I think he's very valuable? I think he's incredibly valuable. I think that the thing that's impressed me the most about Milton this season is he's come a long way as a defender.
Yeah.
He's finally learning how to use his length
Mhm.
on TV. He's got that huge wingspan. He's putting it to use. So I think he'll be very important to this team come the playoffs. I think he's still a player that, to a degree, is in line with the Sixers' future. So I hope that the shot can come along a little more. Obviously, the Cavs game, like you said, that was probably a huge confidence booster for him. Let's just hope for a little more offensive consistency. But regardless, I think that he's the team is obviously much better when he plays, and I think that's going to be the case in the playoffs as well.
Yeah, definitely. And my last question for you before we wrap things up. What is your level of confidence in Doc Rivers heading into this playoffs?
Uh Yeah, I mean, if we put it on 1 to 10, give me about a 7,
Okay.
which is actually higher than I thought that I would answer that question.
Me too. Yeah.
I have, and I think last night's game is a little bit of is slightly affecting my score in a positive way because there were so many things working against the Sixers last night. Uh, Obviously they were down by 20 early on in the game. They didn't have James Harden, second night of a back to back, 3 a.m. Coming into Miami. Uh, but I feel like he coached a resilience for the team. And you saw Joel Embiid. Embiid was so frustrated during the entire game, but it looks like Doc was able to keep the rest of the team very even keeled and able to compete and engage defensively. So it's not just about the zone defense, but it's about keeping that desire intact for the Sixers. So as long as we don't see an all bench lineup in the postseason, I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, I was about to jump in and say a sigh is worth 1,000 words right before you went into it
Yeah.
there. But I mean, Doc is not without his flaws by any means. This, as much as he can put on his front, his I'm Greg Popovich front and his continued defense, this is a postseason where he has a lot to prove too, especially coming off last year and
Yeah.
obviously the track record where he just frankly has not been the best postseason coach, even though he does have that
Yeah.
one ring. So, and in fairness to Doc, like the addition of James Harden changes everything with how he can
Sure.
rotate. So
Yeah.
this I would say heading into this postseason is the true judgment of what Doc can do as a
Yeah.
coach. And I wouldn't say I'm the most confident because I again it's the same frustrations I've had with him since he's been here with like
Mm,
the scripted rotations, the non-fluidity and moving off what he
yeah.
believes is the lineups, just the stubbornness to stick with guys and instead of going with the flow of the game. All
Yeah.
things that just it blows my mind for a guy who's been around basketball as long as he's have for not quite having
Yeah.
like the feel of the pulse of a particular game. But I mean, this is the playoffs that he will be judged off. So I'm not going to be too
Yeah.
hard on him and hope he can get it together. So
I mean, that's what happens when you rely on your stars is, that you
yeah.
don't necessarily have to worry about, fluidity of rotations and things like that. So, or
Hmm.
at least you didn't. Now you kind of always have to. So, I'm curious to see. There's a lot of people who have the negative opinions of Doc for a lot of reasons, but one thing that constantly gets brought up is the constant play of Paul Millsap. So,
Yeah.
I am curious to see what DeAndre Jordan looks like, how that affects the rotations going forward, and how. I mean, I know how Doc's going to utilize him, but as far as who he's paired with and things of that nature, so it's another opportunity for Doc Rivers to not save his name, but really prove himself. I guess is the better way to phrase it.
Yeah, definitely. And again, another frustration is just the no Charles Bassey or B-ball Paul opportunity. That's another come with the
You
territory with
really
Doc.
could have used him last night. I
Yeah.
mean,
I,
I saw a little Isaiah Joe in there, but Paul Reed wasn't in there until the end of the game, I don't believe. And
yeah, no,
it was a night
one
that,
minute
especially
played.
with how tired Embiid was, like you really could have used him.
Yeah, yeah, no, it makes zero sense to me why there isn't like the at least attempt. And for a lot of what we feel about the regular season is a time to just try things out. Let's see what guys
Yeah,
got. I don't understand it, never will, but that's kind of what you kind of know what you're getting, and I don't expect that to
yeah.
change from looking forward with Doc. So, it is what it is. Overall, Sixers still on the upswing. A couple big
Mhm.
games coming up. Back home against the Bulls tomorrow, and then the Nets on Thursday. We will be running a live show at Franklin's Pub Thursday. So Zach, tell us a little bit more about that. And are you excited for this game and what's going on?
Yeah, so we're really excited to have this opportunity. We're going to be going live again, as Sean mentioned, Franklin's Pub. 5:30. We're going to be, or I guess closer to 6. We're going to be getting started over there. But we're going to have some great conversation. We're going to have some giveaways. We're of course going to watch the game at Franklin's Pub and even have a post game recap. So really good opportunity to talk some ball, have some great food, great drinks, among the people, and a great time, for Sixers fans just to come and have some fun, eat, drink, be merry, all that good stuff, and just in a Sixers environment while we are in what is likely it's the most exciting time in Sixers history since 2001. That's
Oh
just
yeah.
what it is. So come on out, celebrate with us. Again, that's Franklin's Pub. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, this is Zach Ciavolella, Sixers managing editor at Philly Sports Network and host of the Baseline Scoop. So make sure you check that out as well. We will be back with you later in the week. James will be back this time. So appreciate all you guys for tuning in, and I will talk to you next time.